Hello and welcome back to the 13th instalment of my F1 chat. My name is Alex Does F1 Stuff, and in today's video we have some very breaking news. Just realised that some of these topics may be considered unlucky and, episode 13 being an unlucky number for some, but also because it's unlucky for some, it's lucky for others. I'm not quite sure how that works. Anyway, we will get straight into the news. And F1 plans to start in Austria in early July. Silverstone, if it goes ahead, will be held without fans, and the French GP has been cancelled. So after having almost like a week or so of nothing really going on news-wise in the Formula One world, we have these three major stories. So we will jump straight on into the very first one, and all of these stories come directly from the Formula One website. And this first is a statement from the CEO, Chase Carey, who targets the beginning of the season to begin in Austria on July 5th. So the statement reads, although this morning it was announced that the French Grand Prix due to take place in late June will not be going ahead, we are now increasingly confident with the progress of our plans to begin our season this summer. We are targeting a start to race in Europe through July, August and the beginning of September, with the first race taking place in Austria on the 3rd to 5th of July weekend. September, October and November would see us race in Eurasia, Asia and the Americas, finishing the season in the Gulf in December with Bahrain before the traditional finale in Abu Dhabi, having completed between 15 to 18 races. So looking at that first paragraph or first two paragraphs of the statement, it is obviously optimistic. It is optimistic. Personally, having this start or this potential start of Austria presumably behind closed doors as well in July still seems a little bit too close. I know that July is a month and a bit away, about 6 weeks away, so things could change, but equally if lockdowns and things do start relaxing, it's only just going to create what could be a second peak and therefore a second lockdown, which we really want to try and avoid. So I think extending lockdown periods and just having one block lockdown period of 10, 12, 15 weeks to just stamp it all out rather than returning to some form of normalcy and then having to go back to this. But anyway, the statement continues, we expect early races to be without fans, but hope fans will be a part of our events as we move further into the schedule. We still have to work out many issues like the procedures for the teams and other partners to enter and operate in each country. The health and safety of all involved will continue to be priority one, and we will only go forward if we are confident we have reliable procedures to address both risks and possible issues. Obviously, one point raised from this little section is if it's not really necessary, why bother risking it? Obviously, then that calls into question, yes, it is necessary because it's going to keep, in, say, Mercedes' case, they have over 1,500 employees at one factory and then about 1,000-ish at the other factory, so that's 2,500 jobs worth of people. So yes, it is essential. And then all the other factories, you've probably got about 10, 15,000 people at just the factories alone. Then you have all the media, then you have all the photographers, I suppose they'd come under media. You've obviously got the drivers, but they're fairly well off themselves. All of the team members, the mechanics that don't necessarily work at the factories, everyone to do with the FOM, FIA and all sorts. That it is essential to all of these people. So it would be wise to get racing whenever we can, but it must be done safely. And finally, in his little statement here, the FIA teams, promoters and other key partners have been working with us throughout these steps, and we want to thank them for their support and efforts during this... wherever I've got lost. We want to thank them all for their support and efforts during this incredibly challenging time. We also want to recognise the fact that the teams have been supporting us at the same time that they have been focusing enormous and heroic efforts to build ventilators to help those infected by COVID-19. So I won't go over the rest of the article, and I feel I've talked about this one enough. Any other issues I'll probably bring up in a second F1 chat slightly later in the week. So we will move straight into article number 2, which comes from, again, the Formula One website, and it is that Silverstone confirms any British Grand Prix will be closed to the fans. So should the British Grand Prix take place this year, Silverstone chief Stuart Pringle says the race would take place behind closed doors given the challenges caused by the ongoing coronavirus pandemic. F1 bosses are currently working on a revised calendar for 2020 after the pandemic forced a series of races of cancellations and postponements. That doesn't quite make sense. Earlier today, organisers in France confirmed the 2020 French Grand Prix will not go ahead. We'll talk about that a little later. And several countries have restrictions on people's movements, and mass governments make it tricky to host events such as international sport, meaning discussions are focused on closed-doors spectacles in a bid to get calendars back up and running. So obviously, as heard in Chase Carey's statement, if this season does get going in the beginning of July, most of the European races will be behind closed doors, which genuinely is the wisest decision to take if racing is to get underway. Obviously then that takes into account where's the track going to make all of their money, because they're having to pay a ludicrous amount of millions to I'm not exactly who they pay to host the F1 track, whether it's F1 as a whole, whether it would now go to Liberty, whether it's the FOM, whether it's the FIA. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I know they have to pay a privilege to host a Formula One race. And the majority of that money that they use to pay comes from ticket sales, and obviously if it's behind closed doors, there's no ticket sales, there's nothing going on. But equally, having a British Grand Prix with no fans is going to be very, very weird. Having any race, I think, with no fans is going to be very, very weird, but none more so than Silverstone, because that race is always packed, always rammed full, and it's gonna be different. There's not much, there's so much just going around my head as all these articles just came through on my phone notifications first thing this morning. I need a bit more time to actually work through exactly what I wanted to say. But without further ado, we will just move straight on into the last article that we will cover today, and that is that organisers confirm the 2020 French Grand Prix will not go ahead. So the organisers of the French Grand Prix have confirmed the event will not go ahead in 2020. The race was due to take place at the Circuit Paul Ricard at the end of June, but officials have announced on Monday morning that the decision of the French government to ban all major events until at least the middle of July, coupled with travel restrictions in place to help contain the spread of coronavirus, meant it will be impossible for the Grand Prix to go ahead. It then becomes the 10th race of the 2020 season to have been cancelled or postponed. So I did cover this in my last Formula One chat, pop a little card in the corner, number 12, where the President Emmanuel Macron banned all of the mass sporting events until the middle of July. So it was fairly, not obvious, but fairly inevitable that the French Grand Prix would be suspended. I'm surprised it's just cancelled as a whole, rather than just postponed and hopefully to find spots later on. As in the statements, Kerry said that the European bit will be in July, August and September, so they could have put it in August, September sort of time. So it is still a little bit surprising to see it just fully cancelled. So the second half of the article goes on to talk about Eric Boulier, who is now the managing director of the Grand Prix de France, Le Castellet, I think that's right. And then there's also some bits about Chase Carey as well. I won't read these, I'll just let you read them whilst I talk about stuff. So as a whole, these three major news articles, they've kind of just sort of rocked us all as fans a little bit, or at least me as a whole, and I'm sure there are other people in the same boat as me. So with Chase Carey bringing out the decision to hopefully start the racing as soon as possible in Austria, that is obviously a very good thing. But At the same time, me having my own opinions on the coronavirus pandemic and how it's affecting the world, I still feel that starting the calendar in July is still too soon, and equally it is slightly irresponsible. I know that it is going to be essential for a lot of people to get racing again, jobs wise, and it will cost some of the smaller teams, Williams, McLaren, Haas, Racing Point, etc., a hell of a lot of money, and will put them at risk of leaving the sport. But I still believe myself that it is unwise to get racing so soon. As for Silverstone being held without fans, I think that's just, if the race will go ahead, it has to be held without fans. You cannot bring all these people together to watch it, which means there's going to be lots of reimbursement. Tracks are going to lose out money unless they get protected by something. There needs to be some sort of help for all of these tracks that are going ahead but without fans, as, I don't know, 75%, 80% of their income comes from the ticket sales alone. And as for France, I mean, it didn't really provide an exciting race last year, or really the year before that. So having it cancelled and not returning, yes, it's not good. It's become the 10th race to do so, but it's not going to be the end of the world that it's not on the calendar. But I think that will be it for this F1 chat. I've sort of rambled on a little bit about each of these topics, and I will leave it there. So all I've got to do now is thank you guys so much for watching, and I will catch you in the video, or the next video of whatever I decide to make. I'll see you then.